Michael had always believed that little things could bring happiness into people's lives. For him, Halloween was not only about costumes or candy, it was about the joy of imagination. Every year since he had moved into the quiet neighborhood, he had made it his tradition to decorate his yard. Some people saw decorating as a small seasonal activity, but for Michael, it was something special, something that connected him to his childhood memories, to his neighbors, and to his own sense of creativity. His house sat on a corner, with a wide yard that gave him plenty of space to work with. He had planted 2 tall maple trees years ago, and now, in autumn, their orange and red leaves formed a natural backdrop for his decorations. The sight of the leaves falling in gentle waves gave him inspiration. He pictured strings of glowing lights hanging like fireflies, pumpkins smiling warmly at visitors, and playful scarecrows guarding the lawn. This year, Michael decided to go all out. He had been working on ideas since the summer, sketching little plans in his notebook. He carved wooden frames, painted wooden signs, and collected old sheets for ghost figures. He didn't buy everything from the store. Most of his decorations were made by hand. He liked building things himself because it made everything feel more personal. As October arrived, Michael's yard slowly transformed. By the first week, he had lined the front walkway with bright pumpkins, some real, some plastic ones he had painted. A cheerful scarecrow stood near the mailbox wearing a straw hat and a patched shirt that Michael had stitched himself. He hung paper bats in the branches of the maple trees where they fluttered whenever the wind blew. But the most exciting part was the ghost. Michael had spent weeks building it. He had used fishing wire and a lightweight frame, covering it with a white sheet so it could float gently above the ground. At night, a soft light shone inside it, making it glow like a friendly spirit. Children walking by in the evenings would point and laugh, their eyes wide with wonder. Neighbors often slowed down when passing his house. Parents stopped with their children, who would giggle and ask questions about the decorations. Michael would wave from his porch, sometimes even stepping down to greet them. He always felt proud seeing others enjoy his work. To Michael, it wasn't just about decorating. It was about community. He wanted the kids in the neighborhood to feel the same magic he had felt as a child. Walking through decorated streets, holding a pumpkin-shaped bucket for candy, and feeling that the world was a little more magical than usual. But not everyone felt the same way. His next-door neighbor, Karen, had never liked Halloween. Since the day Michael moved in, he had noticed her distant nature. She kept her lawn perfectly plain with trimmed grass and no seasonal decor. Her curtains were always drawn in the evenings, and she rarely spoke to anyone beyond polite greetings. Some neighbors whispered that she liked things her way and didn't enjoy seeing too much noise or excitement around her. Karen had made a few comments in past years. Once she complained about the number of children walking on the sidewalk during trick-or-treat night. Another time she frowned at the jack-o'-lanterns on Michael's steps and muttered about messy pumpkins, but Michael always brushed it off. He didn't want conflict. He believed that if he stayed polite, things would stay peaceful. This year, however, Karen seemed more bothered than usual. On the first evening, Michael switched on his Halloween lights. The street glowed warmly. Orange and purple lights wrapped around the maple trees, casting a cheerful glow. Families walking their dogs stopped to admire the display. Kids clapped their hands and asked their parents to take pictures. Michael stood on his porch watching with a smile, his heart swelling with satisfaction. But while most of the neighborhood enjoyed the sight, one pair of eyes watched with disapproval. Karen stood at her window, arms crossed, her face stiff. Her curtains moved slightly, but her frown was clear even through the glass. The following day, Michael was outside adjusting the scarecrow's hat when he heard sharp footsteps. Karen was walking directly toward him, her arms folded tightly across her chest. Her voice carried a firm edge as she called out his name. "Michael," she said, stopping near the edge of his yard. "This has to stop." Michael blinked in surprise. "What has to stop, Karen?" "These decorations," she replied, waving her hand toward his glowing pumpkins and hanging bats. "They're too much. They make the whole street look ridiculous." Michael stayed calm, though he felt a sting at her words. "Karen, I'm just decorating for Halloween." "The kids love it." "It's not hurting anyone." Karen's eyes narrowed. "It's disturbing. People walking by, children laughing. It's noisy. This isn't a circus. It's a neighborhood." "We like peace here," Michael sighed, keeping his voice steady. I'm sorry if it bothers you, but I'm only decorating my own yard. I'm not breaking any rules. It's just for the season. After Halloween, everything will be gone. Karen's frown deepened. If you don't take it down, I'll do something about it. Before Michael could respond, she turned sharply and walked back to her house. The door slammed shut behind her. Michael stood quietly for a moment, feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. He didn't understand why something meant to spread joy could cause so much anger. He wanted peace, but he also wanted to hold on to his tradition. Later that evening, Michael sat on his porch watching the decorations sway gently in the cool breeze. Neighbors continued to smile as they walked by, some even stopping to compliment him. One young boy pointed at the ghost and shouted with excitement, "Look, Mom, it's flying." The mother laughed and thanked Michael for making the street fun. Those moments reminded Michael why he did it. He refused to let one person's disapproval take away the happiness of many. Still, Karen's words lingered in his mind. She had said she would do something about it. What did she mean by that? Michael brushed the thought aside, convincing himself it was just empty frustration. After all, what could she really do? He wasn't violating any rules. He was decorating his own property just like anyone else could. But deep down, a small seed of worry began to grow. The following night, Michael switched on the lights again. The pumpkins glowed, the ghost floated, and the scarecrow stood tall. Once more, children laughed and pointed, neighbors smiled, and the street felt alive. But in the distance, he noticed Karen's curtains twitch. He knew she was watching. He tried to focus on the positive, but a strange unease settled in his stomach. Something told him this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to simply let things go. What Michael didn't know was that her frustration was already turning into a plan, one that would surprise him in ways he never expected. And soon, Halloween decorations would no longer be the center of laughter, but the center of conflict. Michael woke up the next morning to the sound of children laughing outside his window. He pulled the curtains back and smiled. The kids from down the street were pointing at his scarecrow, giggling as they tried to guess what its name might be. Their mother smiled and waved toward Michael's house before gently urging them along toward school. The scene gave Michael a warm feeling inside. It was proof that his efforts mattered, that what he had done with his yard wasn't only decoration but a small source of joy. Yet in the back of his mind, the words Karen had spoken to him the previous evening still echoed like a warning bell. "If you don't take it down, I'll do something about it." Michael shook his head, trying not to let it bother him. He went about his morning routine, made coffee, and prepared for his workday. He worked from home, which allowed him to keep an eye on the yard and make little adjustments here and there during breaks. Around noon, he went outside with a screwdriver to tighten the frame holding up the ghost decoration. The autumn wind had been stronger lately, and he wanted everything to stay secure. While working, he noticed Karen's curtains shift slightly. He knew she was watching. He tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the happy memory of the children's laughter earlier. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the lights of his decorations began to glow, Michael sat on his porch sipping tea. He watched neighbors stroll by, heard footsteps on the sidewalk, and felt proud again. Then suddenly, a loud noise cut through the calm. It was the wail of sirens. Michael frowned and stood up, looking down the street. A police car was approaching, its red and blue lights flashing. His heart sank. He glanced toward Karen's house, and sure enough, her front door opened just as the car pulled to a stop in front of his yard. She stepped outside with her arms folded as if she had been waiting. 2 officers climbed out of the car. Michael felt his stomach tighten as they walked toward him. He greeted them politely, though he couldn't hide the confusion on his face. "Good evening, officers," Michael said. "Is something wrong?" One of the officers, a tall man with a calm voice, replied, "We received a call about a disturbance at this address." Michael blinked. "A disturbance? I'm sorry, but there's nothing happening here. I've just been sitting on my porch." Before the officer could respond, Karen stepped forward. Her voice was sharp, filled with certainty. "Officers, it's him. These decorations are out of control. They're disturbing the peace. Children keep screaming outside my house, people keep stopping, and it's ruining the neighborhood. I want it dealt with." Michael turned to her in disbelief. "Karen, that's not true. The children aren't screaming. They're laughing. People are just enjoying the decorations. How is that disturbing anyone?" Karen crossed her arms tightly. "You don't understand. I have the right to peace in my own home. These flashing lights, the noise of kids gathering. It's too much. The officers glanced at each other. The taller one spoke again. Sir, can we step onto the sidewalk and talk for a moment? Michael nodded and walked with them, keeping his voice calm. Officers, everything you see here is on my property. The lights are simple Halloween decorations, nothing bright enough to disturb anyone. The children come by because they like it, but they aren't loud and it only lasts a few minutes. I'm not breaking any rules. The second officer, a woman with kind eyes, examined the decorations. She even smiled a little at the glowing ghost. They seem harmless to me, she said quietly to her partner. Karen overheard and quickly interjected. No, you don't understand. This is harassment. He knows I don't like it, and he keeps making it bigger every year. It's a direct attack on my peace of mind. Michael took a slow breath, trying to stay respectful. Karen, I'm not targeting you. I'm decorating for Halloween just like people all across town do. It's not meant to upset you. It's meant to bring happiness. The tall officer raised his hand gently to calm both sides. All right, let's settle down. From what I see, there's no law being broken here. Decorations on private property are generally allowed, as long as they don't block sidewalks or create safety issues. Sir, your setup looks safe. Ma'am, I understand your frustration, but this doesn't appear to be a criminal matter. Karen's face turned red. So you're just going to do nothing? You expect me to live like this, surrounded by noise and tacky lights? The woman officer spoke softly but firmly. Ma'am, we're here to make sure no laws are being broken. We can't order someone to remove decorations just because you dislike them. If you feel strongly, you may want to check with the Homeowners Association or local city ordinances. But from our side, there's no violation. Michael felt both relief and sadness. Relief because the officers had confirmed he wasn't in the wrong, but sadness because the situation had escalated to this point. He never wanted his love for Halloween to involve the police. Karen muttered angrily under her breath and stormed back into her house, slamming the door. The officers turned back to Michael. Sorry for the trouble, sir, the tall one said. It happens sometimes. People call when they're upset, even if it isn't really a police matter. You're fine to continue your decorations, just make sure everything stays safe. Michael nodded. Thank you, officers. I really appreciate your understanding. After they left, Michael stood quietly in his yard. The decorations glowed peacefully, the pumpkins smiling as though nothing had happened. But his own smile was gone. He sat on his porch thinking deeply. He had never imagined his decorations could lead to a police visit. He didn't feel angry at the officers, they had done their job with kindness. But Karen's decision to call 911 instead of simply talking to him again weighed heavily on his heart. It wasn't just about Halloween anymore. It was about principle, about how one person's dislike could turn into something bigger than it needed to be. The next day, word spread quickly through the neighborhood. People had seen the flashing lights of the police car and whispers began to circulate. Several neighbors came by to check on Michael. One of them, an older woman named Mrs. Green, shook her head with concern. Michael, I saw the officers here last night. What on earth happened? Michael explained the situation as gently as possible, not wanting to stir more conflict. Mrs. Green listened, then patted his arm. Don't you worry. Everyone knows your decorations bring joy. You're not doing anything wrong. If anything, you've made this street a better place. Other neighbors voiced similar support. Some even offered to speak on his behalf if the situation grew worse. Their kindness comforted Michael, but he knew Karen wasn't finished. She had looked too determined, too angry to simply give up. That evening, as the lights glowed once more, Michael sat quietly on the porch. He saw Karen's curtains move again, saw the shadow of her standing behind them. He knew she was watching, and he knew the battle between joy and disapproval wasn't over. Michael whispered to himself, I won't stop. Not this time. This is my home, and these decorations mean something good. What he didn't know was that Karen, behind her curtains, was already planning her next step. The neighborhood was quiet the morning after the police visit. The autumn air carried the faint smell of fallen leaves, and the sunlight filtered gently through the maple trees in Michael's yard. For most people, it was just another day, but for Michael, everything felt heavier than before. He looked at his decorations with mixed feelings. The pumpkins, the scarecrow, and the floating ghost still gave him pride, but now they also reminded him of Karen's anger and the flashing police lights from the night before. It hurt him to think that something created out of joy had been twisted into something ugly. Michael didn't want to fight with his neighbor. He valued peace, but he also valued fairness. He hadn't done anything wrong. He was careful, respectful, and mindful of safety. He decorated only his property, never trespassing or blocking anyone else's space. So why should he stop just because Karen disliked it? Later that day, Michael went out to rake the leaves from his yard. As he worked, a few neighbors stopped by. Mrs. Green brought him some homemade cookies, her way of showing support. Another neighbor, James, gave him a thumbs up and said, "Don't let her get to you, man. Your yard looks amazing." Their encouragement gave Michael strength, but deep inside he knew Karen wasn't finished. She had looked too determined when the police left. He was right. That evening, Michael sat at his desk, catching up on work emails, when his phone buzzed. It was an email notification from the Homeowners Association, HOA. He frowned, opening it carefully. The message was formal. "Dear Mr. Thompson, we have received a complaint regarding your yard decorations. It has been brought to our attention that your Halloween display may be causing a disturbance to neighbors. Please note that HOA guidelines require decorations to remain respectful and not interfere with community peace. We kindly request that you review the guidelines and ensure compliance. Thank you for your cooperation." Michael leaned back in his chair, letting out a long sigh. He didn't need to guess who had sent the complaint. It was obvious. The email didn't order him to remove his decorations, but it carried a warning tone. Michael knew that if Karen kept sending complaints, the HOA might eventually pressure him more strongly. The next morning, Michael decided to be proactive. He printed out a copy of the HOA rules and read them carefully. He highlighted the sections about seasonal decorations. To his relief, everything he had done was within the guidelines. Decorations were allowed as long as they didn't block sidewalks, didn't use excessive noise, and were taken down shortly after the holiday. Michael's display followed all the rules perfectly. Feeling more confident, he wrote a polite email back to the HOA. "Dear board members, thank you for reaching out. I want to assure you that my Halloween decorations are fully in line with the guidelines. They are safe, respectful, and entirely on my property. The community has enjoyed them, and I have received many positive comments from neighbors. I kindly ask that you let me know if there are any specific rules I may have overlooked. Otherwise, I will continue the display until Halloween is permitted." He hit send, then closed his laptop with a sense of calm. He wasn't trying to be defiant. He was trying to stand up for himself with facts and respect. Later that afternoon, Michael decided to take a walk. As he strolled down the street, several neighbors greeted him warmly. Some even mentioned the police visit. "Don't worry, Michael," one man said. "We saw what happened. Everyone knows you're not in the wrong." Another neighbor added, "Karen's been like this for years. You're just the latest target. Don't let it bring you down." Michael smiled politely, but inside the situation still weighed on him. He wasn't the type to enjoy conflict or being the center of attention. All he wanted was to share some joy through his decorations. That evening, as the sun set and the lights flickered on, Michael felt a bit of peace return. Children once again came by with their parents, pointing at the ghost and laughing. Their happiness reminded him why he did this in the first place. But just as his heart lifted, his phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail notification. Michael pressed play and listened. It was Karen's voice. "Michael, this is Karen. Since you refuse to listen, I've taken this further. The HOA knows, and I will keep filing complaints until something is done. You may think you can get away with this, but I promise you, you won't. Enjoy your little circus while it lasts." Her words made his stomach twist. It wasn't just about decorations anymore. It felt personal. That night, Michael sat quietly on his porch, staring at the glowing pumpkins. His mind was filled with questions. Why did she hate it so much? Why couldn't she simply ignore the decorations if they bothered her? Why did she need to drag everyone else into it? The next few days passed slowly. Karen continued to glare from her window whenever Michael was outside. Once, when children giggled too loudly near his ghost, she stepped out and shouted, "Go play somewhere else." The children ran away, startled, and Michael felt his heart ache. He wanted the neighborhood to feel safe and happy, not fearful. Despite the tension, Michael refused to take down his decorations. Every time he considered it, he thought of the children's joy and the neighbors' support. He also thought of his own childhood memories, the decorated houses that had once inspired him. If he gave up now, what kind of example would that set? By the end of the week, another letter arrived from the HOA, but this one was different. Instead of a warning, it was neutral. Dear Mr. Thompson, thank you for your clarification. After reviewing the guidelines, we see that your decorations are within the permitted limits. Please continue to be mindful of safety and respectful display. We consider this matter resolved. Michael let out a breath of relief. At least the HOA understood. At least someone had listened. But Karen did not take the news well. That evening, as Michael watered his plants, she came out of her house. Her voice was sharp, her tone filled with frustration. So they sided with you, she said bitterly. Of course. Nobody ever takes my concerns seriously. But don't think this is over, Michael. I'll find another way. Michael looked at her calmly, though his heart was beating faster. Karen, I don't want to fight. I'm just decorating for Halloween. That's all. Please, let's just live peacefully. Karen shook her head. Peaceful? You call this peaceful? No, Michael. You've made this street into a playground and I won't stand for it. She turned and stormed back inside, slamming her door so hard that the sound echoed down the street. Michael stood in silence. He knew she meant her words. She wasn't going to stop. That night, as he sat on his porch watching the decorations sway in the cool wind, he felt torn between pride and worry. The pumpkins glowed warmly, but his heart felt heavy. The community supported him, but one neighbor's anger had turned a joyful season into a stressful one. He didn't know what Karen would do next. But he sensed it would be bigger than a complaint or a glare. And he was right. Karen was already planning her next move, something that would bring the conflict to a whole new level. The crisp autumn days rolled on, and the colors of the neighborhood deepened into rich shades of orange, red, and gold. To most people, it was the perfect season. Pumpkins on porches, cool winds, and the smell of baked pies drifting from kitchens. For Michael, however, the beauty of fall was shadowed by unease. He had survived the police visit. He had survived the HOA complaints. His decorations still stood proudly in his yard, glowing every evening with a cheerful warmth. But the conflict with Karen had not ended. If anything, her anger seemed to grow stronger with every day that passed. Michael tried to focus on the positive. Neighbors continued to support him, some even bringing their children over to see the floating ghost or to admire the scarecrow. Families would pause, take photos, and thank him for brightening up the street. One little girl even handed him a drawing she had made of his house with glowing pumpkins. "This is my favorite house," she said shyly. The drawing nearly brought Michael to tears. Moments like these gave him strength. They reminded him why he decorated in the first place. But he couldn't ignore the glares from Karen's window, or the way she slammed her door whenever she saw him. He knew she was planning something more. He didn't have to wait long to find out. A few days later, as Michael returned home from running errands, he noticed a piece of paper taped to his front door. He pulled it off and read it carefully. It was an official-looking notice from the city. Notice of inquiry. We have received a citizen complaint regarding your property. The complaint states that your seasonal decorations may be causing a public disturbance. Please be advised that a city inspector will visit your residence within the next week to review the matter. Michael stood frozen on his porch, the paper trembling slightly in his hand. He felt frustration and disbelief rush through him. Karen had taken the matter to the city. He folded the notice and went inside, dropping it onto his kitchen table. For a long time, he just sat there in silence, staring at the decorations through his window. All he wanted was to bring joy. Yet here he was, being treated as if he were causing trouble. The next day, Michael received several visits from concerned neighbors who had noticed the paper on his door. Mrs. Green, the kind older woman from across the street, frowned deeply when she heard. "This is too much," she said firmly. "You're not disturbing anyone, Michael. You're making this neighborhood better. We won't let her push you out." Another neighbor, James, offered to gather signatures for a petition in support of Michael's decorations. "If the city inspector comes, we'll show them the truth. Everyone loves what you've done here. Everyone except—" "Well, you know." Michael smiled weakly, grateful for the kindness, but in his heart he still worried. What if the city sided with Karen? What if they ordered him to take everything down? That evening he sat on his porch as usual. The decorations glowed gently, the ghost swaying in the cool wind. Children passed by, pointing and giggling. Yet Michael's thoughts were heavy. He wondered how far Karen was willing to go. Meanwhile, inside her house, Karen was already preparing. She had printed out photos of the decorations, highlighting the glowing lights. She had written letters describing the noise of children gathering and the chaos she claimed was ruining her peace. She was determined to convince the city that Michael's display was a problem. A few days later, the inspector arrived. A middle-aged man with a clipboard stepped out of a city car and introduced himself politely. "Mr. Thompson, I'm here regarding a complaint we received. Do you mind if I take a look?" Michael nodded, though his chest felt tight. "Of course. Please come see for yourself." The inspector walked slowly around the yard, making notes. He looked at the pumpkins, the scarecrow, the paper bats, and the floating ghost. He even tested the lights, checking how bright they were. After about 15 minutes, he returned to Michael. "Everything looks fine to me," the inspector said calmly. "The lights aren't too bright, there's no sound system, and the decorations are all on your property. Honestly, this is one of the nicest displays I've seen. I don't see any violation here." Relief washed over Michael. "Thank you," he said sincerely. The inspector nodded. "We'll file a report, but you have nothing to worry about. Enjoy the season." As the inspector left, Michael caught sight of Karen peeking from behind her curtains. She looked furious. That evening, when Michael went to collect his mail, Karen stepped outside. Her voice was sharp, her words cold. "So they let you off again. Figures, nobody ever listens to me. But you'll see, Michael. I won't give up." Michael took a deep breath. He wanted to shout back, to tell her to stop making his life miserable, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Karen, I don't want to fight. Please just let people enjoy the holiday. That's all I'm asking." She shook her head. "You've ruined my peace and I'll ruin your fun." "That's fair, isn't it?" With that, she turned and went back inside. Michael stood there in silence, her words echoing in his mind. "I'll ruin your fun." It hurt to hear, not because he feared her threats, but because he couldn't understand why someone would choose anger over kindness. The next few days were tense. Karen didn't call the police again, nor did she file another city complaint immediately, but she found smaller ways to show her disapproval. She parked her car closer to Michael's property line as if to make a point. She glared at families who stopped to admire the decorations. Once, Michael even saw her taking photos of children near his yard, muttering something under her breath. The neighbors noticed too. Some began avoiding eye contact with Karen, while others openly sided with Michael. One evening, a group of parents brought their children to Michael's house, thanking him for keeping the spirit of Halloween alive. They told him not to let Karen's bitterness take away something so wonderful. Michael felt encouraged, but deep down, he knew the conflict wasn't over. Karen was too stubborn, too determined. She wasn't going to accept defeat quietly. As Halloween night grew closer, the excitement in the neighborhood grew stronger. Families prepared costumes. Children talked eagerly about trick-or-treating, and Michael added a few final touches to his yard. He placed small lanterns along the walkway and carved one last pumpkin, smiling as he gave it a friendly face. But even as the joy of the season surrounded him, Michael felt a shadow of worry. He had a strong feeling that Karen had one more move planned, something bigger than before. And as he looked across the street at her darkened windows, he couldn't shake the thought that she was waiting for the right moment to strike. Halloween morning dawned cold and clear. The golden leaves shimmered in the gentle sunlight, and the air carried the sharp bite of autumn. For most people in the neighborhood, it was the most exciting day of the season. Children woke up buzzing with joy, already talking about costumes, candy, and adventure. Michael stood on his porch sipping his coffee and looking at his yard with quiet pride. His decorations glowed faintly in the morning light, waiting for evening to come. Every pumpkin, every lantern, every simple detail had been carefully placed. To him, it wasn't just a Halloween display. It was a symbol of joy, of tradition, of community, but he also felt tension in his chest. He knew Karen wasn't finished. She had tried the HOA, the police, and even the city. None of it had worked. Yet he could still feel her watching, still sense her bitterness from across the street. Tonight, on Halloween night, he expected her to make one final attempt to spoil everything. By noon, families began passing by, many of them stopping to admire Michael's yard. Some parents even thanked him for keeping the holiday spirit alive. "My kids love your decorations," one father said warmly. "It feels like the heart of the neighborhood." Michael smiled, though the nervousness still lingered in his heart. He wanted tonight to be perfect for the children, no matter what Karen did. Across the street, Karen stood behind her curtains, frowning at every family that stopped. She muttered to herself, her frustration boiling. They act like it's a festival. It's noise, it's chaos. It's all wrong. As the afternoon passed, the neighborhood slowly transformed. Costumes appeared: princesses, superheroes, pirates, and tiny monsters. Parents carried bags of candy, porches lit up with carved pumpkins, and the sound of laughter drifted through the cool air. Michael prepared too. He set a large bowl of candy by the door, adjusted the lanterns, and checked every pumpkin. His heart beat faster as the sun began to set. The sky turned shades of purple and orange, and the neighborhood filled with excitement. Soon the first trick-or-treaters arrived. 2 little boys dressed as astronauts ran up to his porch, their eyes wide with joy. "Wow, this is amazing," one of them shouted, pointing at the floating ghost. Michael chuckled and handed them candy. More families followed. The walkway filled with children giggling, their costumes glowing in the lantern light. Parents snapped pictures, some even asking Michael to join their children in the photos. The atmosphere was pure happiness. But as the evening grew busier, Karen's anger boiled over. She stepped out of her house, her face tight with fury. The laughter and excitement seemed to fuel her rage. She marched toward Michael's yard, her voice cutting through the cheerful sounds. "This is out of control," she shouted. "You're disturbing the peace. There are too many people, too much noise. This is not a carnival, it's a neighborhood." The parents fell silent, their smiles fading. Children clutched their candy bags, unsure of what was happening. Michael stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Karen, please," he said gently. "It's Halloween. The kids are just having fun. No one is causing harm." But Karen shook her head furiously. "Fun? This is chaos. You've turned our street into a circus. I've had enough." She pulled out her phone and in front of everyone dialed 911. The parents gasped, whispering among themselves. Michael's heart sank. He had feared this moment, but seeing it unfold before the children broke his heart even more. Karen spoke sharply into the phone. "Yes, I need the police. There's a disturbance in my neighborhood. Too many people, too much noise. It's dangerous." The children stared, wide-eyed. Some looked frightened, clutching their parents' hands. The joy of the night seemed to fade. Michael felt his chest tighten with sadness. He didn't care about himself. He cared that the children's special night was being ruined. Minutes later, the flashing lights of a police car appeared at the end of the street. The atmosphere grew tense. Parents whispered nervously. Children stepped back, and Karen stood tall, her face filled with satisfaction. 2 officers stepped out of the car. One of them recognized Michael immediately from the previous call. He walked over calmly, his expression serious but not unfriendly. "Evening, Mr. Thompson," the officer said. "We received another call about your property." Michael sighed softly, trying to stay composed. "I understand, officer. You can see what's happening. It's just Halloween. The kids are trick-or-treating." The officer nodded, looking around. He saw the smiling families, the harmless decorations, the bowls of candy. He saw no loud music, no danger, no trouble, only a holiday celebration. He turned back to Karen. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "this is not a disturbance. This is a normal Halloween gathering. Everything here is safe and within reason." Karen's face turned red. "But it's too much. Too many people. This isn't right." The officer shook his head. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but there is no violation here. We cannot stop children from trick-or-treating on Halloween night. Mr. Thompson has done nothing wrong." The parents and children began to relax, relief spreading across their faces. Some even clapped quietly, supporting the officer's words. Michael felt a wave of gratitude. He looked at the children, then at the neighbors, and finally at the officers. His heart swelled with emotion. Despite everything, the truth had been recognized. The second officer leaned toward Michael and whispered kindly, "Don't worry. Enjoy your night. We'll make sure everyone is safe." The officers left, and the police car rolled away. Karen stood frozen, her plan defeated once again. She looked around at the families, at the children smiling once more, and for the first time she seemed unsure of herself. Michael didn't say anything cruel. He didn't gloat. Instead, he turned back to the children and handed out more candy. His calmness, his kindness spoke louder than any argument could. The night continued with even more joy. Families cheered, children laughed, and neighbors stayed longer than usual, as if to show Karen that they stood together. The lanterns glowed brighter, the pumpkins shone proudly, and Michael's yard became the heart of the celebration. Late that night, After the last trick-or-treater had gone home, Michael stood on his porch once more. His decorations flickered gently in the quiet darkness. He thought of everything that had happened. The HOA complaints, the city inspector, the police visits, and Karen's bitterness. He felt tired, but also stronger. He had not let anger win. He had not let bitterness steal the joy from his heart. And as he looked across the street, he saw Karen's house dark and silent. Maybe she would never understand. Maybe she would always choose anger. But Michael knew one thing with certainty. He had chosen kindness, and the neighborhood had chosen to stand with him, and that was enough. As he turned off the lights for the night, Michael whispered to himself, "Halloween is about joy, not fear, and no one can take that away."